Alright, so we're picking this up on about page 164 if you're following along in your book. And the next thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about sort of how to manage the file system is how to change file permissions and directory permissions. Now, um, a chapter or so back, I said to you guys that if you were curious about all the stuff in the long listing file, hang on because we're going to get to it at some point in the future. Well, now is the future. The first thing that we're going to talk about is how to change the owners in the group of the file, and so there's a couple commands that we need to talk about for that. So, let me go over here, and we're going to just try uh, these things right here. And what I want you guys to see here is this command, we may have talked about this back in chapter 2, just gives me a list, the username of the user that I'm currently logged in as. If I do this with sudo, it's going to ask me for my password, and then because sudo runs a command as root, it comes back as root. But if I just run this by myself, it's going to give me my name here. So um, there are two sort of columns of words in here that we can see. You can see I'm in my home directory, and so the listing is gsmith right here and gsmith right here. That first one is the user that owns the file, and so that's me. That's gsmith. If I did an ls in -l in var log, you're going to see that I don't own a lot of these files. These are generally owned by root, although there are a couple exceptions. The other thing that we want to talk about is this command called groups. And if you just type the command in that says groups, it'll tell you what groups you're currently in. And you can see that right now I'm in a group called gsmith, and then I'm in a group called wheel. By default, unless you change it, Linux is going to give you a group that's the same name as your username, and assign that to you as the first group that comes back. So when you type groups, the very first group that returns is your default group. So if put your login name as like Flash Gordon or something, I'm assuming that when you type groups, you're probably going to see, F Gordon as this first thing. And then if you remember to put yourself in the administrator group, you're going to see something here that says wheel. So to go back to our home directory and do an ls-l, this thing right here is the first gsmith is going to be the username, and then when I create a file, it by default, if it's a file that I create, um, you can see that let's take this as an example for this file that we actually just created when we were playing with links. You can see that by default it puts it as owned by me, and then it puts it in my group. Okay, well that's interesting. What does that mean? Well, we'll get to the specifics of this in a minute, but for now, what we need to know is whoever is the owner of the file is going to be the person that has they have the right to do with the file whatever they want to. If I am looking at files in var log, let's do an ls-l var log. Um, if I tried to modify, say, the secure log here that's owned by root, it's not my file, so I probably can't modify it. If I want to erase it, I'm var log secure. It's going to tell me, hey, that's write protected. Are you sure you want to do it? I'm going to say yes, do it. And then it's going to say you still can't do it. Neener, neener, neener. That's because I don't own the file. That's not the full story, but for now, that's what I want you guys to know. If I go back into my home directory and I say, rm new file 2, it just removes it. It's gone because I owned the file. If you have uh, if you're in the right group to modify a file, but you're not the owner, you probably have some permissions, but not as much as the owner. That's painting with a broad brush, and we'll get to the details to that later. But for what I want you guys to know right now is there's going to be ways that you can change the ownership of a file. So let's say I'm going to go to var, I'm just going to do this in temp. well, here's why. If I do this in my home directory, if it's a folder that I own. My home directory is a folder that I own, and I don't want to change that. So I would be giving another user access to a file that's in my home directory. That can cause some things that are a little bit interesting and can get funky with the permissions. Temp is generally a directory where everybody has permission to write stuff, so that's fine for what we're doing now. It just makes it a little bit easier. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just do something. I'm going to create a file using the touch command, and I'm going to call it file1. And I should be doing ls-l of file1. And you can see right here, the only things that we're really worried about right now are these two columns that have the user and the group. Now, if I wanted to change the ownership of this file to somebody else, if we do an ls in home, we can see that we've got Bilbo Baggins and Frodo Baggins both have accounts on this machine. So I can use a command that's called chown, and it's spelled like this, and this is short for change owner. And so what I can do is I can say chown file1 fbaggins. And what this is going to do, if I have this right, I may have the arguments backwards, as I think you guys are seeing I do frequently. What this is going to do is this is going to change the owner of that file from gsmith to Frodo Baggins. And sure enough, I got it backwards. So chown fbaggins file1. So as I was saying, what you always want to do is put the username that you're changing this file to, that you're giving Frodo ownership of this file, and then the name of the file. You can put more files in there, but for now let's just do this with file1. If I do something like this, it's going to tell me I can't do it. Why can't I do this? Well, that's interesting. Actually, let me go back and see.